What the public tend to know about in relation to the House of Keys is question time, because question time is broadcast, of course. The main purpose, though, of the House of Keys is to pass legislation. And the great thing about the Isle of Man is we can make our own laws. And within a year of someone coming up with a really good idea, you can have a new law passed. And a year might sound like a long time, but actually when you think you've got to draft it, you've got to consult with people, you've got to make sure that the law works and doesn't drive a sort of coach and horses through a whole load of other bits of legislation. But a year is quite a reasonable time.
So from where we're standing, the Speaker of the House of Keys here,
yes, that's the
and then the members.
Yes, and the members. There used to be, because we used to have what are called sheedings, the certain benches were represented by a particular sheeding, but then obviously there's been quite a significant change in the membership and the constituencies at the last election. So now apparently it's an alphabetical seating order, with the person who gets the most votes sitting at the front, person with the least votes sitting at the back. Better opportunity to have a quick snooze at the back, though.
But if the members of the public want to come in here and the sittings are open, we've got the public gallery here too.
Yes, and it's really important that the public have that opportunity to come and listen to what their politicians are saying on their behalf. And unlike practically every other parliament in the world, the access is incredible. Everywhere else you go, there's big glass barriers and things to stop people, but here the public are effectively just sitting the other side of a piece of wood.
I don't know how you did any sleeping with those people watching you from the walls.
I would never have slept in the House of Keys. Well, Legislative Council actually really does proper work in terms of legislation. I'm not saying that Keys don't do proper work, but they don't do as much work, I think it's fair to say, in terms of scrutinising legislation. Certainly Legco are known for very intensive scrutiny of legislation. Keys generally consider the legislation first. It's not always the case. Sometimes a piece of legislation would start in Legislative Council, but usually it starts in the Keys. Legco can and often does then amend the legislation. They would usually find occasional flaws that may have been missed in the Keys. As far as the Keys are concerned, and I certainly would support this, they are directly elected by the public, so they should know the mind of the public when it comes to what policies should be in place. If Legco sends stuff back to Keys and Keys aren't happy, ultimately Keys will prevail in those discussions after a little bit of to-ing and fro-ing. Well, House of Keys was all about legislation, primarily about legislation, whereas Tynwald has a much broader role in terms of discussion on policy. So all the big debates about the future direction of government, where government needs the support of Tynwald, all those debates would take place in here. So obviously the budget debate takes place in Tynwald. And secondary legislation, so things like regulations and orders and things like this, which aren't quite as significant as the primary legislation, which are the acts that are produced by Keys and Legco. They're also considered in here. And obviously in Tynwald they all sit, and the publicly elected part, which is the Keys, and the part that's elected by the Keys, which is Legislative Council, they all count the same in Tynwald. They're all Tynwald members, although Tynwald voting is a bit bizarre in as much as the 24 Keys take a vote and the 9 members of Legislative Council take a vote, and only if both parts of Tynwald are in agreement does the vote carry. There is then an opportunity for Keys members, if they choose, to come back for a combined vote the following month.
And Tynwald's sittings during the legislative year held in the third week of the month. And again, we were looking up at the public gallery there. Members of the public can come in and observe. Yes,
and are encouraged to do so, because again, it's really important that the policy debates generally are probably much more interesting, I think, to most members of the public. Debates on legislation, 60 or 70 clause acts can be quite tiresome, but policy, people talking about perhaps the future constitutional relationship of the Isle of Man with the United Kingdom, things like that. Those big policy issues would be debated in Tynwald, and I think the public are interested in that. And of course they can listen on Manx Radio and find out all about it as well.